talk about, well, I want to talk to the children of narcissists, and I want to talk about the way that narcissistic parents abuse their children. And I also want to talk about some of the things that maybe we can do about it to kind of like deflect that type of abuse. And I'm hoping that you guys will be able to catch some of the pretty birds that come and visit me on my deck. There was a blue jay. So cool. So anyway, okay, so let's get to it. So the first thing I want to say is that if you are the child of a narcissist, life ain't fair. Like, you were not allowed to have a normal childhood. You probably felt like I just said earlier to a group that I'm coaching, like you felt like the fish outside the aquarium, that everybody else had a better life than you, and there was probably some shame that you associated with the idea or the knowing that other children had different life experiences than you did. And I just want to say right off the bat that it's time to take that SOS off. An SOS is what I call the sweater of shame. Shame is something that happens from the outside. Now, healthy guilt is something that we feel internally. So, you know, if I steal my best friend's, pocketbook and I don't tell her about it, and I feel guilty about it, that's healthy internal guilt. If I feel shame because of the way that I look, someone's made me feel shame that came from the outside. So shame comes from the outside. So it's important that if you have any shame from childhood associated with feeling like you weren't good enough or there was something wrong with you, and that's the reason why you didn't have the kinds of life experiences Tommy and Jane and whoever had, then you really have to look at that and do what you can to tell yourself, that's not my shame. It's not my fault my family wasn't healthy. It's not my fault that my parents were abusive. It's not my fault that my parents weren't able to mirror back to me a sense that I was worthy. So it's really, really important. So let's talk about the ways that parents abuse their children. Parentification. So parentification is a term used to describe the type of abuse a child of a narcissist experiences when the parent makes the child completely responsible for them. So let's say you have a parent who is single and your parent doesn't allow you to date, or your parent is always complaining about how sick she is or how sick he is, and will make you feel guilty when you try to have friends, or you try to go have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. The parent will use any tactic necessary to make you feel guilty for having your own life. So that's parentification. And sadly, that can happen very early on. And in a lot of cases, that continues into adulthood. So as the parents age, the dynamic and the enmeshment caused by the initial attachment trauma, which is unhealthy bonding, means healthy bonding was never allowed to take place. What happens is that dynamic continues into late adulthood. So you literally can be 40, 50, 60 and taking care of and feeling responsible for your parent and never have had your own sense of self and sense of identity. It really can happen. And at any point in life, you can begin to change those dynamics and begin taking care of yourself and detaching, from the parent who has used this tactic against you. You really can. It does take some skill, but it is possible. The second term used to describe the type of narcissistic abuse that parents inflict on their children is infantilization. So it's a form of dependency, much like parentification, but what happens is the parent implies that the child can't take care of himself or herself, and the parent goes above and beyond healthy standards and actually fosters a dependency on the parent so that the parent never has to be alone. So you take a human being who has all the potential in the world to be whatever he or she wants to be, and mother or father comes off like, oh, I'll take care of that for you, or you can't do that, let me handle it for you. And there's this sense of learned helplessness, like I can't take care of myself and I need mommy and daddy to take care of me. And it literally cripples the child well into adulthood. You can be 60 years old and feel like you can't make a decision without your elderly mother and father like helping you make that final decision. It's possible. But again, it's also possible that once you become aware of the dynamic and you understand that it goes back to narcissism of the parent, and it's not your fault, dear one. You know, if you've been abused this way because your parents did not have a sense of self, and they kind of like became a parasite to you, that's not your fault. And you can heal that, which is great, great news. Triangulation is when a parent, let's say you have a sibling, or sometimes a narcissistic parent will triangulate you with the other parent, or they'll triangulate you against, or they'll become between you and your sister or your brother or your sibling, a member of your family. Sometimes what will happen is mom or dad will actually bond with one of your siblings against you. That's triangulation. So it's a sense that you're out, you're really not in. And it's very, very damaging, because we as human beings need to feel connected to our parents, especially our parents, and especially mom. You know, if it's not one thing, I heard a client say, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. Which, hello, I'm a mom too, and I'm preparing myself for the fallout, especially as my kids get older. Because we wound our children, and the most significant, I feel, just my opinion, the most significant relationship that we have as children is with our mother, with the being or the vehicle that got us to planet Earth. We were made of her cells, and yes, our father's cells, but we were created in her body, and we were connected to her body through the umbilical cord, which is like an extension cord. And once that extension cord is cut, a new extension cord is supposed to take place. It's invisible, but it's supposed to take place. And when we are born and we feel separate from this being that we have felt one with, we're traumatized. And if that doesn't stabilize very, very quickly, and there's consistent break in that connection, we suffer severe attachment trauma. Not our fault. And so when we're triangulated, that is, to me, that's an abuse, or an exploitation of that attachment trauma, the need to bond to mommy or daddy, and that's being exploited, and that's very cruel. But I feel, as a life coach, what I do is I help expand people's consciousness, and I created my program. That's what I do. I help a large group of people expand their consciousness, which is so cool, and we play off each other. But I really believe that until we can name it, we can't heal it. So knowing that, oh, that's what's happening with triangulation. Oh, that's parentification. Oh, that's, infantilization. Oh, that's what that is. Once you can name it, then you can clearly see what the protocol is to healing it. So, hopefully this video is striking a chord with some of you. Narcissistic supply. So that's when parents use their children as a source of ego supply. So it could be identifying. We have, I don't want to throw any group of people under the bus, but we all know parents who have children and push them to be the best dancer, or push them to be the best cheerleader, or push them to be the skinniest girl. I had one client who gave me permission to talk about this actually a while back, but it's really just popped into my head now, where her mom was very heavy, and her mother insisted that she be thin, and was on her about everything that she ate so that she could be the head cheerleader at the school, and so that she can go and she could brag about her daughter at church to the other moms. And so that's a source of ego supply for and I believe that's narcissistic supply, using your children as a way, as a source, as an ego supply, so that you can feel better about anything in yourself that you can't get in control of yet, or you feel lack about, and using your children to feel better about yourself. We can also use our children as a form of narcissistic supply in a negative way through gaslighting. So gaslighting is another way narcissistic parents abuse children. Parents who question their children's reality, they lie to their children. They say, oh, I didn't say that, or I didn't mean that. I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I never said that. Meanwhile, the parent did say whatever they said. It could be, it could be something as innocuous, like, you're going out like that, you're wearing those jeans out. I wonder what girls are going to think about you wearing those jeans. And then the kid turns around and says, why would you say that? And the parent goes, say what? I didn't say anything, And the kid standing there scratching his head like, Dad, you just made fun of me. No, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. Things like that they screw with with a child's understanding of his reality. So it happens all the time. Or you embarrass a child, or you say something to a child behind closed doors, and that child confronts you in front of the other parent, and then that parent, the parent that's getting confronted, denies that anything was ever said. So that also happens. So narcissist, when it comes to gaslighting, it could be also, it's not talked about a lot, but I think actually instigating a child to the point where the child cries, that happens a lot. A lot of my clients present with that, where they say that, my mother wasn't happy until I cried, and unfortunately that was even my experience. Like, I would just get bullied and bullied and bullied to the point that I broke. And then the minute I broke, it was like my mom would back off, and it was like almost like pushing me to that point where she was able to crack me. And when I burst open with tears, that's when she backed off. It was like almost like a relief, or a release. My mom and I have come a long way, but my childhood was really, really rough because of that dynamic and her unawareness of the situation. At the end of the day, being born to a narcissistic parent makes you feel like there's something wrong with you, because it's unnatural not to be loved by your own parent. It's not natural. I believe that unlike birds, I love birds, as you can see, unlike birds who for the most part naturally take care of their young, and it's instinctual, human beings have to rely on, when you're born, you have to rely on what your mother has hopefully learned about how to take care of a child. So much of how we were treated as children is reliant upon how our parents were treated. And where it should be very, very instinctual for mothers to be able to take care of their children, so much of how well a job that we do, or how poor of a job we do, really gets affected by how well we were treated. I'm proud to say that I know lots of people that did not get what they deserved as children, and they became fabulous parents, and that's just awesome. But in some cases, our mothers will treat us the way they were treated. So we're different when it comes to animals like that. We really need to rely on having good role models, model for us healthy behavior. And the better our parents were loved and taken care of, the better that they should have been able to love us. Now, for those of us who are experiencing the fallout of narcissistic abuse, and maybe your parent isn't like NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, which is really tough disorder to diagnose. And I know a lot of us on YouTube throw that word around a lot. So when I say narcissist, I use a very broad stroke, and I'm talking about narcissistic defenses. I'm talking about narcissistic traits. I'm talking about complete self-absorption. I'm talking about parents who completely alienate their children, who aren't able to feel and connect to their children, who aren't attuned to their children. And in my opinion, that'll come off like narcissism. Like, you can't see me, I'm your child, and you cannot feel my feelings. Like, you don't have any awareness in your body about what you just said made me feel. That's narcissistic. So I don't mean to imply that I have the right to diagnose anybody with NPD. It's a very difficult disorder to diagnose. But I'm humbly stating that when I say the children of narcissists, I'm using a very broad stroke. And I'm speaking to anyone who has ever had the experience of not feeling seen by their parent because their parent presented with narcissistic type defenses or narcissistic type traits, or traits that were completely self-absorbed and alienated, and traits that alienated them from feeling seen.
You come from a narcissistic family or a dysfunctional family, there are unspoken rules. And I don't think that we as adults recognize how the rules that we absorbed as children affected us as adults. When you come from a toxic family, you're basically taught that you're not allowed to feel, you're not allowed to think, you're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to be you. I mean, if you can't be you, if you can't talk about how you feel as a child, Think about what that does to you. Think about the energy that has to get pushed down. Think about living in that type of fear every day, day in and day out. Think about how hyper-vigilant, how hyper-aware a child has to be when they have a narcissistic mother, or they have a narcissistic father, or their family is dysfunctional, their family is narcissistic. Think about what it's like to be a child that is all limbic, all feeling, but the messages that you're absorbing in your reality are telling you that you can't be you. You can't be the energy being that you are. And so in a narcissistic family, there are rules. And the rules are you're not allowed to tell the truth. And the rules are that you have to play along with our program. Now, the scapegoated child is generally the child that can't help but feel, right? So you're the child that is obviously tense and can't deny that you're uncomfortable. There are children who just can't deny that they're frightened or that they are recognizing that something's wrong. There are some children that are better at going into denial and playing along with the program, and then there are children who just can't. And so the scapegoated child is the child that can't go along with the program. The scapegoated child is the child in the family that doesn't buy the competition thing. So it's not uncommon to be part of a narcissistic system where mommy and daddy, or whoever your parents are, have begun to triangulate the children. So there's a favorite child. She might be really pretty, or the son might be really great at sports, or there might be a child that's really smart. You might be the child that, is kind of ordinary, right? Or doesn't get A's and B's and is struggling to get a C. Or you're a child that just isn't into the competition thing. If you think about a narcissistic family wants to be seen as better than the neighbors. So there's this competition between them and other people. And so it's your job, dear one, if you're their child, to make them look good. So if you don't do that, if you're not interested in making mom and dad look good, if you're more interested in being yourself, if you refuse to be the child that goes against another child, right? Remember, narcissistic parents love to separate children. I think that's one of the saddest things that happen to people that come from a narcissistic family, is that the sibling relationships are destroyed through dysfunction, right? Siblings are raised in families that are oppressive, they're very stressed, and they can't go against mom and dad, so they end up fighting against one another. And mom and dad are the role models for the children in the family. And so the tension is so high. And if mom is bullying the older sister, it's not uncommon for the sister to bully another sibling, or vice versa, a younger sibling. There's going to be bullying going on. It's not uncommon. If you are the scapegoated child, you might be the child that refuses to participate in bullying in the family, right? Narcissistic families want to see everyone arguing. They want to see that tension. Because if they can get you to argue amongst themselves, it's like, divide and conquer. If they can get the siblings to separate, right? If mom can glom onto this daughter, then she can speak to the ear of this daughter and get this daughter to dislike the other daughter, right? And so what happens in that situation? Mom is able to, everything that she's feeling about herself that she hasn't been able to resolve, she projects it onto the scapegoated daughter. At the same time, she creates a source of narcissistic supply from the daughter that she has chosen to be her, her sidekick or her golden child, right? And so think about the manipulation when you're thinking about a narcissistic mother who claims one child, scapegoats the other child. Think about the emotional and mental control she has over both these children. And then what happens? If the children aren't aware, what ends up happening is they begin fighting amongst themselves. And this can last an entire lifetime. I've seen time and time again where sibling relationships are destroyed because of the parents. So if you're the scapegoated child, you're someone that didn't want to give in to that competition. You might have called mom out like, don't put me up against my sister, or don't put me up against my brother, or don't talk about my brother that way. Or you're the kid that is like, not into trying to make mom look good. So mom wants you to put a bunch of makeup on, or she wants you to lose some weight. Why? Because it makes her look good, at least in her head. Because mom thinks she can read the mind of other people, right? Think about it. If you have a narcissistic mom that wants you to look good because she thinks that if you look good, that makes her look good too, then we are presuming that mom thinks that she knows what other people think. So mom manipulating you, mom chastising you, mom making you feel bad about you is because ultimately, think about how crazy this is. Ultimately, that's because mom thinks she knows what other people think. It's insane. You don't know what other people think. Mom doesn't know what other people think. In many of the cases, people can see if a mom is highly narcissistic, people can sometimes see it. Not always. But if it's overt, if mom can't control herself, at a track meet, and she puts you down because you didn't run fast enough or you didn't win, or if she embarrasses you in front of a teacher because you have acne or you're a little overweight, that's easy to spot. If you have a vulnerable narcissist, that is not always easy to spot. And lots of times the community feels sorry for mom because she's introverted, right? And she might even seem so helpless, right? And so it's not so black and white. It's really important that people understand that. You can have a mom who's more overt and grandiose, right? Really into her looks. Everything's about superficiality and making her look good, right? And putting the children down that don't make her look good. So if you're the child that refuses to make mom look good, you're going to be scapegoated. If you have a mom who is more vulnerable narcissist, so behind closed doors, you see the rage, you see the anger. She's verbally abusive when no one's around. She tries to make you feel guilty. She gave up her life for you, right? She gives you the sense that you owe her. You're obligated to her. She had you the natural way. You did not knock on her uterus and say, I would like to be born today. She had you. Her body created you. However you got here, you got here. It's not your fault. But for the rest of your natural life, if you have a vulnerable narcissistic mother, you're going to pay. And she's going to project all of her feelings of unease about herself, all of her insecurities about herself, all of her failures, all of the discontent she feels about herself, she's going to project it onto you and try to make you feel guilty for being born. I remember being a little girl, and I used to feel, I think I talk about this in The Road Back to Me, and I used to feel like I was a garbage can. I could tell when my mom's energy was getting to the point where she was going to explode. In my head, it was every 3 days. If our house went 3 days without an explosion, I knew it was coming, because that's the longest my house was calm. Something was going to happen. And it used to feel like my mom sliced open the top of my head and dumped all of the garbage that was inside of her inside of me. And when she was done yelling and raging and criticizing me, it was almost like she felt better. But I absorbed it. It was like I was the receptacle of all of this. Now that doesn't happen in front of people. That doesn't happen at church. That doesn't happen in front of the teacher. And so if you're that child, if you are the child that can't take it, right, and you start acting out and you cry at the dinner table, you're going to be the scapegoat. The siblings in the family that are able to deny it and they're able to be stoic and they're able to fawn and people please and rescue and get into the good graces of mom and dad, they will not be so scapegoated, but you will. So piggybacking off of what I just said, you will become the scapegoated child in the family if you feel, if you talk about your feelings. If mom says something to you and you say, that hurt me, Or if mom says, go sit down. You tell her you're hungry and she tells you to go sit down and you say, but I'm hungry. You're telling her how you feel. You did not take the cue. Mom wants nothing to do with you right now, so go sit down. If you say to mom, Mom, you said you were going to pick me up at 3 o'clock. You're not paying attention to the family rules. You're not allowed to talk, dear one. You're not allowed to tell the truth. You're supposed to take the blame. You're supposed to just accept whatever shows up, and you're not supposed to confront what you think is unfair. So if you're the child in the family that does the feeling, that does the expressing, you're going to be the scapegoat. If you're the child that does not go along with needing to take sides, when you come from a narcissistic family, it's all about conquer and divide. The parents of the family want you to take sides. A narcissistic mom might want you to go against your dad, to take her side. She might get in your ear and tell you all of these terrible things about your dad, that which, by the way, are very likely not true if your mother's a narcissist, right? If you refuse to not go against your dad, she's going to scapegoat you, right? She's going to talk to your sisters and your brothers and your aunts and your uncles and anybody who will listen, because you become her nemesis. You become the mirror to the truth that she's a bully, that she's trying to push you around, that she's trying to manipulate you, that she's trying to control you. You're not allowed to be an individual when you come from a narcissistic family. If you refuse to allow your narcissistic father to throw your mother under the bus, right? If you don't put up with his manipulation, if you don't allow him to use you against your mother or against your sibling, right? Then you're going to become his scapegoat. If you're the child that refuses to submit, right? So when you come from a dysfunctional family, you have to submit. If you don't submit, you're going to be punished. You're going to be persecuted. The adults in the family that are dysfunctional, that are running this home, they're going to pick you out of the crowd. If you are the child that refuses to submit, so you are the child that pushes back a little bit, right? You know, you're the child that's like, not going along with the program. You just can't go along with the program. So let's say your mom asks you to do something and it's 11 o'clock at night and you're in bed and she wants you to go downstairs and get her a glass of water. And you're 17 years old, or you might even be 10 years old, and you say, I've been sleeping for 2 hours or 3 hours. Why can't you go get your own glass of water? Ah, you're not submitting. You're not playing the game, dear one. Narcissistic mommy. Mommy dearest said, I'm thirsty, go get me a glass of water. It doesn't matter that you've been sleeping for 3 hours. Mommy dearest wants a glass of water and she wants it now, Tommy. She wants it now. So if you're the child that doesn't submit, if you're the child that says, why should I have to do that? Now, I'm not suggesting that children should be disrespectful to their parents. I'm not suggesting that. But I am one that believes that the more respect, the more attuned you are to your children when they're younger, the less problems you might have with them when they're older. The more mature you are as an adult, the less you take natural, let's say, teenage rebellion personally. And this can become a rabbit hole. I am just saying that the more you attune yourself to a child, the less you might have problems later on. So the more freedom there is within limits and boundaries. But again, that's not what this talk is about. I don't think it makes any sense to emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically abuse a child and then to expect this child to A, have self-respect, and B, have respect for the people who have been abusing them. And the scapegoated child is a child that is not going to submit easily. The scapegoated child is the child that's going to be somewhat of an individual. The scapegoated child is the one that's going to be pushing back a little bit, asking questions. When you come from a dysfunctional family, you're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to ask, well, why do I have to do that? You know, why do I have to get out of bed? Why do I have to come home from school early instead of going to the library to study for a test so you can go play tennis? Why do I have to feed the kids because you want to go out with your boyfriend? You know, why do I have to go get a second job when you don't have a job? Why am I, taking out the garbage? And why am I the only one? You have 6 kids. Why am I the only one that has any chores to do? If you are the child that dares to question authority, in the narcissistic family, you, dear one, will become the scapegoat. If you're the child that is not easily affected by seeking validation, in other words, like, you get it, right? Like, you know there's something wrong, and you're watching your other siblings fawn, and you're watching your other siblings like run around trying to take care of mommy dearest and daddy dearest, right? And you just don't. So you're just not giving in. You're just not catering. You're not jumping when they walk into the room. You're making yourself a target, unfortunately. And that's not your fault. It's a very natural response for some of us to like not give in. And I think that the most honest child in the family is the one that becomes the target. The child that is most in touch with their feelings, the child that is most in touch with this indecency is the child that will be scapegoated. The child that is not subservient, the child that is not acquiescing, the child that is not tiptoeing, walking around eggshells is going to become the narcissistic family scapegoat. Some of the problems with being the scapegoated child is that sometimes you begin to believe what your mother and father are telling you. You begin to internalize the things that they say. So if you are emotional, they come out with you're too emotional. If you are sensitive, they say that you're too sensitive, right? In my case, I was called too sensitive. I was called a drama queen. And then I just started to shut down. About 11 or 12, I just stopped showing emotion. And then I was told that I was a cold fish. And so I really didn't know how to be. But the message was clear. For whatever reason, I was not enough. I was not enough to gain my mother's validation. I was not enough to be loved. I was not enough to be understood. There's just something about me that was wrong. When you are the scapegoated child, what ends up happening is all the focus is on you. And so the narcissistic parents, right? The narcissistic parents, the codependent parents, they're not understanding that the problem is between the parents, and they've created this structure that the children have to live in. And so rather than look at one another, they're looking at you. They're blaming you, right? So when they're out in public, it's like, oh, she's so emotional. All the attention is on you. You can't sit straight. You don't look good enough. They embarrass you in front of the waiter. All this attention is on you. You feel like a specimen in a petri dish under a microscope. But when you're little, you don't understand why. And so a problem with being a scapegoated child is that you begin to internalize these dysfunctional messages from the narcissistic parents. Another problem that scapegoated children have is that you have learned that love is conditional. You have learned that you must earn the love and validation from someone that you care about. And so your sense of relationships is not healthy. You go into relationships feeling half empty, right? So you go into relationships thinking that you are not worthy. And you go into relationships thinking that it's normal to have to seek validation. It's normal to have to gain this person's validation. That's what I did. My first marriage, I married my mother. I went into the relationship feeling like I wasn't good enough, and I had to make sure that I earned my first husband's love. Another issue with being a scapegoated child is sometimes you have just so much pain associated with the rejection and abandonment from the narcissistic family that you shut down. It's like relationships are too scary. I remember thinking, I was about 13, 14 going into high school, and I had made the decision, I don't want friends. Relationships are too uncomfortable, they're too painful. I couldn't figure out how to be a person. And every time I tried, I screwed up. I messed it up. And so I remember being about 13 or 14 and having this idea in my head, like, I'm just going to work in Manhattan. I'm going to have a couple of cats. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But in my head it was, I'm done. Relationships are too scary. It was too painful. So that's a problem that scapegoated children bring into their future relationships. It's all part of how we internalize these unspoken narcissistic family rules. It's up to us later on in life to confront them head on. And sometimes we don't see it because part of us, I know for me, until I was about 35 or 36, I was still highly codependent on my parents. even though I was scapegoated, even though my dad knew what was going on between my mother and I and did nothing. All he did was ask me to understand how tough her life was. And so more devaluing me, more minimizing, more marginalizing. And I was about 36 before I realized, I'm a grown-up and I don't have to tolerate this anymore. And I had that showdown with my mom. Before anybody gets excited about what this video seems to be about, we have to understand that anger and getting in touch with anger is a very important part of the healing process. If you were raised by narcissistic parents, you know that it's almost impossible to be permitted to feel what you feel. And when you were traumatized by being raised by a narcissistic parent, and I also want to say that anyone that has not been raised by a narcissist may not be able to relate to this video. That people who have actually been raised by a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father and who know what it's like, if you're the daughter of a narcissistic mother, you know what it's like to feel like your mother has disdain for you. You know what it feels like to feel like your mother is jealous of you. You know what it feels like if you're the son of a narcissistic father to feel like your father is in competition with you and he's highly critical of you and he wants you to do what he wants you to do and he cannot validate you unless you absolutely bend over backwards to fit his version of you. You know what it feels like to go to school and to feel like there's something wrong with you when you hear about your classmates talking about what they did with their moms or the dads over their weekend or the family. You know what it feels like to grow up craving love like you crave air. I mean, it is a feeling of suffocation, like you're being suffocated of air. Like love is right in front of you. There's your mom, or there's your dad, and you can't touch it. It can't get to you. And it makes you feel like you're suffocating. And then as you grow up, you begin to believe, I believe it's the cognitive dissonance and the backwards rationalization that our minds naturally go through that cause us to come to the conclusion that it must be us. There's something eternally flawed about me that makes it impossible for my mother or father to love me. And we carry this wound around us like the scarlet letter. And it's Mother's Day, it's Father's Day, it's their birthday, it's our birthday, and there are family gatherings and you feel like a fish outside of the aquarium and nobody understands what your perspective is all about. Nobody can appreciate the perspective of the inner child or the child who was born to and raised by a narcissistic parent. It is so mind-boggling, and I get it now, but when you're young and you're being raised by somebody who completely lacks self-awareness, there is no accountability, they're always wrong, and their agenda is to make you, their child, wrong, right? They're getting narcissistic supply from the criticism, from embarrassing you, from putting you down, from making you feel like nothing you ever do is good enough, to making you feel like a complete obligation, that it's all your fault that your mother or your father has to work so hard and they had all these opportunities that they had to give up on because you were born, and aren't they these wonderful people that rolled around in the sack with somebody and happened to get pregnant and had you. It's all your fault, dear one. It's all your fault. Don't you understand? This is what a narcissistic parent does. They create you and then they berate you, right? They create you and then they demoralize you. They criticize you, humiliate you, discard you, devalue you. You will never be good enough. You will be compared to your cousins and your sister, or, you will suffer their internal projections. In other words, like everything that your mother is guilty of, she'll vomit it all over you. Everything that your father wasn't able to achieve, he'll put that on you. And he'll feel like you owe it to him to achieve this dream that he was never able to achieve. And you will be accused of being selfish, ungrateful for not doing what these people wanted you to do. Nothing you do will ever be good enough, ever, ever. They will make fun of you on your wedding day. If you go to them and you tell them that you're in pain, they'll call you a drama queen. If you go to them after being in some toxic relationship, they'll suggest that you were just too selfish or that you're too much and you can't get along with anybody. This is the type of consistent gaslighting that children who are raised by narcissistic parents endure day in and day out from the moment they're born. Now, a big problem is that when you are this person and you have this dysfunctional relationship with your mother and your father, and I think a lot more of us have these types of relationship than we're actually aware of. I think that a narcissistic parent can annihilate a human being's ability to hold on to themselves and to be objective, to the point where you're just so beaten down, you don't even try to, it's learned helplessness. You don't even try to fight back anymore. Your complex PTSD is so off the charts that you're not fighting, you're not fawning, you're freezing, you're fleeing, you're using escapism. You know that any interaction with your mother and or your father is going to be extremely painful, so why try? You know that as a child, no matter how many A's you got or B's you got, or no matter how hard you tried to please them, it was never enough. The criticism was always there. They discarded you. They devalued you. You know that no matter how hard you tried to get a trophy, it was never good enough. And so you know that going to them when you're wounded and when you're hurt, you're just going to be more hurt. They're going to blame you for why you're hurt. You know that. And so you get to a point where you are just not even going to try anymore. Or you can get stuck fighting with your parents, just all out fighting and angry, and that's the only thing that's the only way to communicate. Or you can end up fawning the rest of your life. That's the problem. When you come from a traumatic background where emotional neglect is the norm, psychological abuse is the norm. I'm not even talking about overt physical abuse. I'm talking about the onslaught of psychological abuse, the constant invalidation, the constant guilt, the constant shame. It's maddening. It's absolutely maddening. Going to your mother or your father for comfort and being, taught that, you don't deserve their compassion. I had one client tell me that she said to her mother, I just always thought that one day you'd be proud of me. And she said, well, as of yet, you've never done anything that I could actually say that I'm proud of you for. This is somebody who achieved great success in her career, and it was not enough for her narcissistic mother. So it's like they're always moving the goalpost, right? I'll never be able to please you. And yet this is air. This is love. This is the person who is supposed to show you that you are worthy, that you are enough, right? When you look into the eyes of your mother, into the eyes of your father, what should be coming back is, you are enough and I love you. That allows you to find your identity. The who I am is enough, because this person who I think is absolutely amazing and represents God to me says that I am enough. Now, because you said it, there is a witness, right? My mother has said it. My father has said it. There's a witness to my worth. Now I know that I am. Now I know I exist. And I know that whatever I am is worthy. Now, if you come from a home like that and that's been your experience, then you're able to set boundaries. You're able to say, hey, knock it off. That hurts, right? So when you have to fight or push back, you do, right? You're not someone who's going to go into rescuing and enabling and fixing, right? That's what codependents do. And that's why narcissists and codependents, they're like hands in a glove. Because, I believe that narcissists are, I think it's fair to say we all understand this by now, that a narcissist is self-focused. Right? And a codependent is other focused. So it's two people in one relationship, two people focused on the one person. And this is whether you're in an intimate relationship or you're in a relationship with a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father. You are in a relationship with two people, and both people are worried about the one person. Worried about what? What they think, what they feel, what they want, what they say about you, what they don't say about you, what they do, what they don't do. If you're in a narcissistic relationship, the two people are concerned about the one person. So the narcissist is concerned about what I think about my daughter that continues to disappoint me, and is so selfish, and wishes she was me. If I'm the narcissistic mother, then I'm thinking about what I think about my daughter. And if I'm the codependent daughter, the wounded daughter stuck in some CPTSD response, then I might be obsessed, which I was. I was that daughter that was obsessed. It was a constant loop in my head. What is my mother going to think? What is my mother going to think? Is this going to please her? Is this going to make her angry? Unbelievable. Until I was about 36 years old and I had, an OK Corral moment with my mother where I pointed my finger in her head in her face and said, you're not the boss of me anymore and I'm not 12 years old anymore and you don't get to treat me like this. Thank goodness I was in therapy at the time with a psychotherapist that understood codependency. And, he was helping me understand that I had no I, that being raised in this home had taught me that I didn't have a right to my own Buddha self, my own inner self. I had my own inner child. I had no right to protect my inner child. I had no right to say, hey, knock it off. I was in escapism mode. I was in OCD mode. I was in love addiction mode. I was anywhere but here, dealing with how I felt about this grown-ass person, my mother, treating me in such a cruel way and lacking the awareness as to how she was affecting me. My mother had no awareness that she was the adult child of two drunks. Yes, two drunks. Alcoholics are alcoholics, but my grandparents were drunks, passed out on the couch drunk. No clean clothes, no food in the refrigerator, mice, rats, cockroaches. That's how my mom grew up. So all of that stuff is unresolved. And who does she project it on? She has me at 19 years old. She was an angry person. So very, very strange. But my mother, in my opinion, would take her anger out on me. All of her resentment, all of her frustration, she took it out on me. And I was an innocent little baby that just wanted my mommy. I have no concept that my mother's 19 years old. I have no concept that her father died 5 months before I was born. I have no concept that my father is high on the narcissistic spectrum and she's frustrated. I have no concept of what it means to be the adult child of an alcoholic. I'm an innocent baby born to this crazy situation, and my experience was hostile. My mother didn't have the ability to nurture me. I don't blame her anymore, but I'm just saying it like it was, and so very strange. Mom was passive aggressive with me and verbally abusive with me, physically abusive, psychologically abusive, and I could see her be passive aggressive with my dad. But holy Hannah, she was so codependent on that man. She stuffed all her emotions and she toned herself down to make him happy. But when there was no one around, there was hell to pay because that woman was on a rampage and she was a rageaholic. Now, the problem we have as adult children of narcissistic parents is that we were annihilated day in and day out. We loved these people. We were dependent upon these people that we knew we needed for our survival. So if I get cast out of this tribe, I don't eat, I have nowhere to sleep. That is terrifying to know that the person that you love can hurt you and is hurting you. And it's a double whammy when the other parent, in my case, my dad knew that me and my mom had some stuff going on. And you know what he did? He told me to worry about her. So now if you think about that, there's a trinity of people, mom, dad, child, me, and mom's worried about mom's worried about dad, right? Dad's worried about mom, dad's worried about dad. No one's worrying about the child and how the child is perceiving this situation. And we want to know why we end up as love addicts and drug addicts and have eating disorders, suffer with abandonment trauma, are terrified of rejection, are afraid we give up our careers, we're afraid to surpass any level that our mother was at or any level that our father was at. We tone ourselves down, we create this pecking order. Well, they create the pecking order and we never quite get to the point where we feel like we're equals to our parents and God forbid we surpass them. This is crazy making. Another level of this is when you grow up in this type of a home and the neighbors don't see it. The teachers don't see it. The pediatrician doesn't see it. Everybody sees Susie Sunshine that goes to church every Sunday and reads the Bible and listens to Christian music. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. That's what everybody else sees. No one sees the reality of the inner child, or the child that is born to people who have serious emotional, mental health issues. Nobody sees that. And so here you are, this little person born to planet Earth in a very abrasive experience, and your heart space, this is how I think it goes down, okay? This is just my theory, because I believe everything at the end of the day is vibrational, right? So you got a little baby that is innocent, divine, and pure, is bloop, plopped into this external 3D experience, and the energy of the home is thick and abusive and toxic and cold and blah, blah, blah. It's nothing but it's not nurturing, right? And mom's full of stuff and dad's full of stuff, all this emotional baggage, and this baby's inner being and brain has to figure out very quickly what the heck is going on. And so I believe that when a child is born to a toxic environment, their heart space perceives this information, and this information is relayed to the brain, and the brain goes to work, wiring this brain for stress or, security, relaxation, and growth, and healthy brain development. That's not your fault. If you are now, easily frightened, if you are somebody who struggles with eating disorders, or if you're somebody who keeps attracting narcissistic people, if you're somebody who escapes all the time through addiction or alcohol or sex addiction or whatever, that's not your fault. If you are a people pleaser, or if you are a head bobber, if you see yourself as the picker-upper, you're the mop, you're the broom, you're the paper towel, you're the bleach, you're everything in your family. You are the person in your family that has no needs, right? You are there for everybody else. Who are you going to attract? You're going to attract somebody that takes and takes and takes. That's what you're going to attract. That is not your fault. You might be somebody who is stuck in reactivity. Again, not your fault. If you're born as an innocent child to a situation or a home that makes you feel like your life is in jeopardy, well, think about the survival. We have to figure out fight or flight, and when you're born to people that you depend on, you can't run away from them. You are stuck, dear one. You are stuck. So codependency, depression, anxiety, in my humble opinion, is the result of being born in these situations. We need to be looking under the hood of our conscious mind and looking into the subconscious mind and going back in time and figuring out why. Why am I codependent? Why do I keep attracting narcissists? Why do I fawn? Why do I hang on to relationships when it is blatantly obvious to everybody else but me that the person is not interested in me? I've attracted a love avoidant. Why do I keep trying? Why do I keep throwing myself up against the door? And don't think that just women do this. Men do this too. Codependent men from dysfunctional homes where they were raised by a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father end up in lots of situations being codependent men that chase more narcissistic women, or they get involved with women who can't receive the love that they want to offer them, right? And so this happens across the board. Now, the reason it's important that we get in touch with anger is because anger allows us to feel me, the I that I am. When you are a child and you're born to dysfunctional people, that ability is annihilated. You get mad at your parent because they left you in the rain. They were supposed to pick you up at 3 o'clock and they went out to the gym, or they went out to play tennis, or they went to go do whatever the hell dysfunctional parents do, and they didn't care to pick you up, and they thought, oh, well, she could walk home. It's not that far. Meanwhile, it's 27 blocks, and there's a thunderstorm out, right? You're just getting over the flu. Mom doesn't care. If mom's a narcissist, she's able to rationalize. Blah, 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 blah. Well, I cooked her breakfast. She's got clothes on her back. She doesn't pay rent. You're 8 years old. 8 years old. Hello, this is crazy town, but this is what happens, right? God forbid you walk home and you say to your mom, Mom, you were supposed to pick me up at 3 o'clock. God forbid you have that I am moment. I exist, and this is who I am, and this is anger, and this is good, and this is real. Because healthy people, they feel anger. Healthy people can process anger. They recognize anger as valid. It means that something happened in my experience that I am not in alignment with, that is completely unfair, and I need a boundary here. Can I get an amen? So that's what healthy anger is, right? So if you're 8 years old and you say to your narcissistic mother, hey, where were you? Were you out drinking again? Or did you go out with your boyfriend again? Are you out playing tennis again? Or whatever it is, right? You know what your narcissistic mother is going to do? Forget about it. She's going to annihilate you. She's going to stomp on your head. She's going to make you feel like you had no right in the world to question her or to get angry at her. There is no fairness when it comes to a narcissistic mother. A narcissistic mother is always right, even when it is blatantly obvious to the entire world that you left your daughter in the rain at 3 o'clock to go play tennis with your new boyfriend. Okay? Not going to see it. She's going to turn it around. She's going to try to make you feel guilty. She's going to talk about the fact that you had dinner last night and 2 weeks ago how she did show up to pick you up. The fact that she did not show up for you now and you had to walk home 27 blocks in a thunderstorm doesn't matter, dear one, when you have a narcissistic mother. Irrelevant. When you are that child, guess what? You have been consistently taught and conditioned, and what I say is psychologically programmed. You have these default settings in your brain associated with setting a boundary with mom or talking about how you feel. So now what happens when you talk about how you feel, which is what you're supposed to be doing, right? And expressing yourself is what you're supposed to be doing. That's how you develop your boundaries as a person, right? That's how you say, this is who I am, right? By acknowledging this anger, right? When you do that and it's annihilated consistently, you know what happens in your brain? Your brain learns to associate more pain with standing up for yourself than shutting up. Right? So guess what? Rather than avoid more pain and harassment, now mommy's not talking to me for a month, and now mommy's on the phone talking to her boyfriend about what a nasty little selfish little girl, ungrateful little girl I am. Rather than my mom now not letting me go see my dad, I shut up. Right? I shut up. It is not worth talking to this woman. It is not worth talking to a narcissistic father about how he embarrassed you at the baseball field. It's not worth it. He's going to smack you in the back of the head in the truck as soon as no one's around, right? This is what's going to happen. So children from these homes learn to cut themselves off. So their heart space, you want to talk about chakras, your heart space is constricted. You walk around feeling like there's an elephant on your chest, and you can't tell anybody because the people that that know your parents, don't see what they're doing to you. Narcissism, in most cases, I think, happens behind closed doors. This is Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing kind of thing going on, where, and if you're a real narcissist, like mom or dad, if they're a real narcissist, they go to work bragging about, how proud they are of you. And when they come home, they're talking smack about you. They're putting you down. And you're like, holy Hannah, what is happening? Quick story. When I was about 12 or 13 years old, I remember my mom asked me, and any of you out there who have had a narcissistic mother or father, or a mom or a dad that's at least on the spectrum, let's just say, not very good at nurturing you and validating you, understanding you. Let's just say that. You'll get this story. So I'm about, I guess between the ages of 12 and 14 maybe. And my mom says, so what do you want for Christmas? So I remember feeling like, should I tell her what I want? She's asking me, but, I'm kind of afraid because my mother had always infused me with this idea that I was selfish, that I was ungrateful, that I was the worst person. I remember feeling I am bad. Like I can't do good things because I'm bad. My mother would call me a bad girl. Sorry, she's passed on. The angel over my shoulder, that represents my mom to me. I know that when she crossed over, she learned all the things that she could have done better. I get it now. But in the moment, this is what she and I went through. It was a very toxic, unfair, abusive relationship, in my humble opinion. And so anyway, this is what I grew up with. So when my mom asked me, like, what do you want? I was afraid. I was like, I don't know how to answer that. You're going to shoot me if I tell you what I really want? You're like, you're going to call your friends and tell them like how selfish I am, but you're asking me what I want. So I'm so confused. When you have a narcissistic mom or a narcissistic dad, seriously, dear one, you are damned if you do and damned if you don't. So, whatever. So anyway, she asked me, come on, tell me what you want. And I said, well, a lot of my friends have these nameplate rings or these initial rings. So back in the day, I was born in the 60s. And by the time I was sometime in the 70s or I guess late 70s, early 80s, back in the day, at least in Queens, New York, a big deal was like these letter rings. So it would be this tiny little initial with these little tiny diamonds in it, right? I didn't care if it was real or not real. I just, well, you know, I'd like an L ring. And she looked at me, she said, what makes you think you deserve that? It would, I could feel it happening all over again. My entire, from my throat down to my root chakra it just gets tightened up when I remember her doing that to me. And that was the norm, right? That was the norm. So it was almost like she asked me to stick my neck out and, but you asked me what I wanted and I honestly told you, and now you're shooting me down and suggesting I don't deserve what I asked for. It felt like acid in my brain. And yet at the same time, I can't fight her. I need her. And at the same time, like, there's nothing that I can do in that moment besides freeze, right? Besides freeze. And I felt so much shame, right? And then what do? Then I go to school the next day and I try to win an art ribbon, or I try to, you know, get a really good grade because I don't want my mom to think that I'm not worthy. So I try to fawn, right? Oh, it's so maddening. So anyway, Christmas comes and lo and behold, there's this little box. And I open up the box and it's the L ring. So I look at the box and I look at her and I'm speechless. Again, damned if you do, I don't know what to do. And so I looked at her and she looked at me and she said, what, you're not going to say anything? And I was like, I don't know what to say. And she says, you're so ungrateful, Lisa. Nothing I ever do for you is good enough. I was so frozen on Christmas morning thinking, and you know, this is happening in front of my sister, my brother, my father. No one says anything. No one says anything. That's another thing. When you live with these types of experiences, other people are watching it, but no one says anything, right? And so you feel so alone and so helpless in the world. And who are you going to go to? You're going to go to the school teacher. You're going to go to the school counselor. And what are they going to do? They're going to send your butt home. And now you've got to deal with that, right? There is no one there to protect you. When you come from a home like this, you feel so unsafe and you feel so unprotected. And your mind is doing everything that it possibly can to avoid further pain. That is not your fault. No, it's not easy to make friends when you live in this type of environment. No, it's not easy to trust people. You can't trust the people that are supposed to take care of you. So no, it's not going to be easy to trust people. No, it's not going to be easy to be vulnerable. No, you might not really push yourself to go out for the job you really want. It's scary to stick your neck out. And that's what happens when you come from this type of a home. You've been taught that if you stick your neck out, you're going to pay a high price. And you've been taught that really getting in touch with your vulnerable self comes with a cost. So you've been taught that toning yourself down, holding yourself back is safer than putting yourself out there. You know, and that's how you run your life until, in lots of cases, bam, you end up in a romantic relationship. And then, my Lord, all of your abandonment trauma, your attachment trauma, all of your fear of rejection surfaces, and you're either going to be love addicted, codependent, or love avoidant, or disorganized. You're going to have a very difficult time securely attaching in a healthy way, and that's not your fault, okay? The good news is that if you can figure this stuff out, and if you can self-diagnose yourself, because let's face it, codependency is not in the DSM. And in terms of narcissistic abuse, you know, you walk into, you know, a lot of therapists don't want you saying, my husband's a narcissist or my mother's a narcissist. They don't want you saying that, right? And so it can be really, really difficult. I do believe that therapy with the right therapist, especially a trauma-informed therapist, is the way to go. And definitely interviewing a therapist and asking them, do you understand narcissistic abuse and codependency? Because I think that's what I've been experiencing, and I'd like to come and explore what I think is happening to me. This is the information and the knowledge that I've gained, and I'd really like someone to help me through this. I think I've experienced this complex PTSD thing. I think that my childhood impacted me, and I really need to talk to a therapist that is willing to explore these ideas. I think that's a really healthy route to go. I was definitely, my entire world shifted when I sat inside a psychotherapist's office who understood codependency and who specifically understood what it meant to be raised by two unrecovered adult children of alcoholics that were raised by pretty much narcissistic people. And it took me a while on the path to understand that, narcissistic parents suffered narcissistic abuse. I don't want to hear that in the beginning of my journey. It was too much for me to, I can't worry about you. My whole life I'm worried about you. I got to worry about me. I got to find my inner child. And that, oh yes, that is healthy narcissism, my friend. Because if you don't have healthy narcissism, you don't have an eye. And you can't bite people back if they're pushing you around. And until you learn that you have teeth, until you learn that you can bite back, until you learn that you can be aware of your own codependency and you can put a narcissist in their place and you can end a narcissistic relationship and you can stop giving to somebody who does not want you to give to them, and you can stop giving to somebody who pushes you away, you can stop giving to someone who never considers you, until you learn that you can end that cycle, you're going to keep attracting these cycles. So it is absolutely imperative that, you develop this ability to hold on to yourself and to hold on to anger. I'm not saying that you go and you knock the door down of your narcissistic parents' home. I'm not saying that you go complete no contact rule. I do believe that in most cases, if you're dealing with narcissistic, toxic, malignant, narcissistic parents, no contact is the way to go. Because you can have one conversation with a narcissistic parent and they can pull you down the rabbit hole. It was a couple of years ago that I finally said to my kids, because part of what I always struggled with as a mom is, my children have absolutely no contact with their dad, right? And I always kind of struggled with that, and I wanted to make sure that my children made that decision on their own, and it wasn't because I interfered in their perception of him or their experience of him, right? And it was, if you have a narcissistic spouse and you're trying to deal with co-parenting, it's like trying to co-parent with King Kong or Godzilla. It's like, come on, dude. You're like, just give me a break once in a while. Give it up. Let it go. No, they don't let it go. They persecute you. They punish you. They have to avenge you. They didn't do anything wrong. It was all you. And they will use your children against you. Okay? It's crazy town. And I finally got to a point where I was just like, I have to let this go. Whatever my kids decide, they decide. But it was, my kids were doing really, really well. And I remember the moment that my daughter had each child, well, actually all three children. I remember the moment in each of their lives when they had the conversation with their dad. And I knew, he's dangerous to their mental health. No accountability. Complete projection. Never says, I'm sorry. And if he does say he's sorry, he's lying. And next week he's telling you, I would have said anything to get you off my back, right? The discard, got involved with the woman. He had warned me years before. And he said, when I get a woman, I'm not going to have anything to do with our kids, Lisa. Is that what you want? If you want to get a divorce, this is what's going to happen. I'm not going to have anything to do with our children, Lisa. Oh, that's my fault? If we get divorced and you don't have anything to do with your children? I mean, he was a prophet back then. He told me that when he got involved with a woman, he would discard his children. And that's exactly what he did. And I remember the moment in each of my children's lives when it became apparent that he was detrimental to their mental health. They wanted to love him. They wanted to get along with him. They wanted to meet him halfway. They wanted to understand his relationship with his new girlfriend and eventual new wife. They wanted to. But there was just no giving on his side. It was just, you're wrong and I'm right. And let me tell you something. When you live with somebody who thinks they're Moses or who thinks they are as good as Jesus because once in a while they read a Bible verse while they're sitting on the toilet bowl, oh, Lord, it's nonsensical. It is just insanity. It is crazy making. And then people like this, what they like to do is they like to say, that's not very Christian of you, Lisa. I never said that that I was a model Christian. I never said, Why are you using that against me? You know, like they will throw everything at you and the kitchen sink to try to make you feel guilty, to try to annihilate you, to try to gaslight you, to get you to doubt your reality, and for you to feel responsible for their faulty perception of you. And this is crazy making, because if you don't know what you're dealing with, you stay on this cycle. You stay in this loop. That's why I think understanding your childhood is such a big, big piece of healing from narcissistic abuse. Absolutely. And getting in touch with your anger allows you to get in touch with your I, right? So I'm not saying that you have to go no contact with your parents, although I think that that's a good thing to do, especially if they are malignant narcissists, and every time you talk to them, they have the ability to pull you into a rabbit hole, right? That's not such a bad idea, going no contact, right? You know, I'm not saying that you go on social media and you say, I figured it out, my mother is a narcissist, and you shame her through social media. That's not what I'm saying, because that's really not going to solve anything at all. I'm not saying that you fire off, emails to your parents saying, I figured this out, you're this and you're that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is acknowledge within yourself the anger that you are entitled to feel because you were robbed and cheated of a right to connect to love, right? Because your parents were so messed up, right? This is not your fault. Your parents are so messed up that they weren't connected to their own love and heart space, right? They weren't connected to love. They were disconnected from love. And in their head, for whatever reason, they became narcissistic. They began to project onto you, and you paid the price of what happened to them. So this is the karmic wheel that spins. The Bible actually says that the sins of the father and the mother fall on the children. I think this is what happens. We just pass the torch as parents unless we freaking wake up. So the whole journey to healing from codependency and narcissistic abuse is to wake up. You can't fix a hole in the wall you cannot see. You want to see what was wrong. Once you become the observer and the witness of what was wrong, then you can change what's happening in the now. So getting in touch with your anger helps you find yourself. It helps you say, wait a minute, where is my inner child that went through all of this chaos and went through all of this abuse? Where is this little mind in my head that has created these faulty perceptions of myself? Where is this little person that's living in survival mode and who has been annihilated of their right to feel connected to the love that they are? Where is this person, right? Allowing yourself to be anger leads to your ability to develop self-compassion. Once you develop compassion for this little person that experienced this type of a reality all by herself or himself, you are on the road to recovery. Now, it is not easy, especially when we live in a society that says, honor your mother and father, right? Or your mother or your father has already had those sidebar conversations with your future husband or wife and set the tone that you're crazy and that you were a trouble child and you always gave them trouble, right? So just in case you tell your future spouse, girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever, about your mother or father, the road has already been tainted. Your spouse already thinks you're the problem. I know that happened because it happened to me, right? My mother and father went out of their way to tell the men that I dated and my husband that I was crazy, that there was something wrong with me, right? That I was just too much. Did I know that I was going to eventually marry my mother? Hell no, I didn't know that. I was repeating the past. My mother withheld her love from me. My mother was passive aggressive. My mother was very critical of me. My mother could not connect to me, didn't want to. And when I wanted to, her response was, you're too selfish, right? You are ungrateful. Nothing I ever do for you is ever good enough, Lisa. Exhausting. And that is the same energy being that I married until I allowed myself to get angry. I allowed myself to get angry at even myself because I was the common denominator. I was angry that I didn't know, but this anger that I tapped into, like this unfairness, that I had lived this way unconsciously, this anger allowed me to eventually find a way to get myself out of the rabbit hole. And the reality is there is no rescue boat coming, right? When you are understanding all of this stuff, my experience at least was I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff and I just fell backwards, and there was no floor. That I knew emotionally that there was no floor, and I was just free falling. And I would reach for a branch, and there was no branch. And I would reach to hold on to something, and nothing was there. And I was just free falling, right? Completely severed from all of the attachments that I had, even though that they weren't enough, from my mother, from my father, from my sister, from my brother, from my ex-husband. All of these primary attachments that I had been engaged in a codependent way with, seeking approval, seeking validation, caretaking, fawning, people-pleasing, toning myself down, afraid of, being discarded. All of it happened all at one time for me, and I believe that I suffered some type of a mental breakdown, absolutely, because who I was during that period of my time was not me. I was a reactive mess, I suffered from severe abandonment, and I was not in my right mind, and it took me quite a bit of time to, and embarrassing moments, and just humiliating myself, and like the men that I clung to were just, Lord, it's taken me a while to get past all that, but all of it taught me, that the power was within me, and that being born to such a dysfunctional experience really pushed me off the path to my own inner light. And eventually I was able to forgive my parents and recognize that they were subject to the law of karma, and they were just as unconscious as anybody else. And they were victims of narcissistic abuse as well. But that didn't come until I finally allowed myself to get in touch with anger. And so if you have a narcissistic parent, like I said, I must reiterate, when I started to get in touch with anger, there was this one moment where I said to my mother, you are not the boss of me. I am not 12 anymore. You don't get to treat me this way. If ever a girl needed a mother, it is now. Get out of my way. I'm leaving. And then there was another moment in time with my father, who my father was always, I found it more difficult to confront him. He was a strong Marine, very macho, scary guy when he got angry, and that's how he ruled the house. If he didn't like what was going on, he just raged, so we were terrified of my father, and my mother was afraid of him, so I was afraid of him. But there was a time where I was going through something with my ex-husband, and I just looked at my father and was basically like, how dare you not take my side right now? How dare you know that he is doing what he is doing, and you are saying nothing? You are inviting him to dinner, and I was just like, I am freaking done here. We're done. So this is what it's like to grow up with parents who don't get it, and who actually go out of their way to project, triangulate, and punish you for the stuff that's going on inside of them. They are so not aware, of themselves and their actions, and they never take accountability. And a situation like this with both my mother and my father, they never said they were sorry. They never took accountability for it. So, it is so important to get in touch with your anger so that you can say, here, I'm going to pin the tail on the donkey. That's what they did. That's what she said. That's why I feel this way. And you don't take this information and beat people over the head with it. That's not the reason for this information. The reason for this information is so that you can go no contact. So you don't have to go to that Sunday meal. So you can say no. So you can walk out during a conversation. So you can honor yourself. So that you can honor yourself. Remember, if you are healthy, you're able to touch anger and express yourself, and then you return back to a state of homeostasis. If you're stuck in anger, that's not good. If you are stuck in a state of fight or flight, that's not good. But to never be able to get in touch with anger and to be angry over what happened to you as a child keeps you stuck. It keeps you codependent. It keeps you fawning. It keeps you escaping, right? Or it keeps you reactive. But none of that is healthy. So getting in touch with your anger can help you. Especially if you've never gotten in touch with your anger, learn to find your I. If you are stuck in anger, that's not good, right? What you need is self-compassion. There are so many life skills that you didn't learn, and it's not your fault. And so I'm really grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that you're learning about this stuff. I'm so grateful that you're thinking about it and you're willing to look at your childhood and figure out what were the consequences of being raised in a narcissistic family. My name is Lisa Romano. I'm the Breakthrough Life Coach, and if you'd like to check out the 12-week Breakthrough Coaching Program, I have 2 versions of the program now. I have an on-demand version and a live version, and if you go to my website, you can learn more about that at www.lisaaromano.com. So if you were the scapegoat, if you were the golden child, if you were the hero child, if you were the invisible child, the 12-week Breakthrough Coaching Program can help you reconnect to your inner child and heal the subconscious programs that are keeping you stuck. It's my personal blueprint out of the subconscious codependent mind, and it is an honor to share this with you. And if you'd like content, check out the next video, and don't forget to click the link below so you can take the codependency quiz. If you're in a trauma bonded situation, you are someone who most likely makes excuses for an abusive person. So when people try to interfere, you go right into protecting or defending the person who is putting you down or who is abusing you in a different way. So you end up defending the abuser.